So I've started this track, and it seems that I will be the last one in this track again. So I'm welcoming all of our online participants, and let's start. So very often I have such assignments, and I should translate from English into Ukrainian and Russian. And by this means, I have been saving time on a regular basis for 5 years. So in general, I save 1/3 of the working time per each assignment. As usual, as always, I have a disclaimer. Everything that I'm going to tell you, I prove to be efficient in translation from English into Ukrainian and Russian. Of course, there were some different cases, and sometimes when I asked, my clients sent me parallel texts of some corporate messages from Polish or Czech languages, if they were ready already. So they were useful for me. But on the daily basis, I didn't use such text. For all these tricks, of course, you should use CAT tools, because it's convenient, and without them, you can't do this magic. Of course, for additional CAT tools, you could fine-tune some additional tools, but I will tell you about it a little bit later. And in order to speed up your work, you should receive an approval from your client, because conditions of work could be different, conditions of your cooperation could be different, and there could be different cases. So it's always better to receive an approval in the beginning than to be penalized in the end. So some clients have stereotypes about using Google Translate and so on. And even using different machine tools, you should always take care and pay your attention to your work, to all the processes, because all these gotchas, all the snacks could be defined and could be found not only in the manual translation, but even in the machine translation. And especially because some constructions, some phrases are just prone to be used in different languages, from one language parent to another, some like polysemantic words and so on and so on. And the main thing in this is to have breaks. Because a break helps you to reload your brain from one language to another. And for me, an ideal break is to have a 1-hour nap after the lunch. And so prior to lunch, I translate into Ukrainian, and after lunch I could do the same translation but into Russian, and by means of the nap, I mean that I have a clear difference, and I will not be surprised by some silly mistakes. Why I'm going to tell all of this? So in the beginning it was a word from the client. Could you please handle Russian translation of the brochure as well? Yes, of course I could. So I started to think that 30-page guideline, how to translate it manually, I didn't want to do it actually. So this case happened many years ago, but that was the real start of this parallel translation. The next slides will be dedicated to MemoQ. This is the second top-ranked product after Trados. I think MemoQ have the similar features and characteristics, but I'm actually used to work in MemoQ. That's why I just try to do everything on it. So let's use MemoQ as an example. We have 2 languages as an example, but we could just do in one language per translation manually, as it said, conventionally, conservatively. So you create a separate project for this client, you do from English into Ukrainian, and this should be, you correct all grammatical mistakes, you You just check all punctuation, everything that should be on the appropriate level of quality. Everything, it seems to be a quality translation, but that's not a final version. So, and then I will explain why and how. And the file, the source file that we received from the client, you could, if it's exclusive, it's easy. But if you have a Word file or any other type of document, we just add this document to another project from English to Russian in MemoQ, because if in MemoQ they will not be just crossed. But if you use Studio, both languages will be in the same project, and there will be such a tricky point how to find what you need. What is the next step? So again, we translate into Russian language, but such figures, addresses, such things you could translate manually. But everything else in MemoQ, you have such a function to create a view. So it means a view of your guideline, your leaflet, text. So there should something could be some repetitive words or empty segments. It's very useful to create such view. So you could look on this slide on this old interface. So this is very useful when, for example, you translate something into Russian, and there's a range of some works, and you have some fuzzy image, and you received some already partial translated files. So you store, you just download this view in the simple table in RTF format, and it's a very useful function. You could edit this file on any gadget, even on phone, and if you just are cautious, you just could add this file letter to your MemoQ. I've already told you about these functions during previous presentation, and this two-language table, you could open it, and so this table looks like this. Of course, there's no Russian translation, so there's no magic. It can't be there. And if you work with Word or in any phone application, all that colored in gray, you should not touch it. You should not even copy-paste it, because then there would be no magic and you can't do it. I don't know how it works internally, but you should not touch it. And then again, this table you could import back to the Ukrainian project. In MemoQ, finally, luckily there are no artificial obstacles, so it just looks at this program looks at it like an empty file, and it could be translated into Ukrainian language. So, but these guidelines, this document has been already translated into Ukrainian, so we are doing pre-translation. We just, if anything excessive, we could just take it off. I just could show to you how it could be done. There could be some problems with text if they are redundant in this file. But actually, by 1 minute process, you could just work with it and make this table. Ukrainian translation you could also download in 2 columns in RTF format. And it's very good that you can't save this file with the same name, because initially this table was with Rus, now we have Ukr, so this table will look like this. And we have now almost final version of the Ukrainian translation. You could copy it into the separate Word file. It means that we have done also preliminary work needed for the translation from Ukrainian into Russian. Depending on the volume of work, you will need from 1 to 5 minutes to cover it. So 5 minutes really you will need if there is a huge volume of work for 5-week translation period. For example, I needed 2 minutes to prepare the document for the translation of the 2,000 of words, but actually I made these photos, and of course I controlled the time. And now we have a dilemma. Should we use MT for the translation into Ukrainian Russian language pair? The best option, of course, is to ask clients. If in your cooperation conditions there is no direct and clear ban to use MT, then you could ask for the clients. If there is a ban, you are prohibited to use MT, then you could create a separate, the third project for the translation from Ukrainian to Russian, add this separate Word document and translate it from the Ukrainian intervention manually how it is. Yes, once I've done it. But actually, I've done it for my purpose, for my personal interest, because I really wanted to understand how it will be faster. And actually, even translating manually, it was faster than translating from English into Russian and looking for some tips and advices into Ukrainian translation. Then, what is the next step? If we are allowed to use Google Translation, now in the Google Translation we could add a document, but this document should not have more than 5,000 of characters. You could, if your document is more than 5,000 characters, you could divide it into different documents and then upload it one by one. But usually, what my assignments usually are just usually fit into this 5,000 high level. Then we have this document again. We have the translation into Russian, and we could copy-paste it, this Russian translation from Ukrainian Russian language pair into English Russian language pair, add this table to the memo queue, and very carefully check all the things. And here is a very good example, very clear example. For example, seat placement is similar. But in Russian and Ukrainian, that's different. In Russian, it's absolutely incorrect translation due to the Google knowledge of this word. So you should check all the details and correct some such silly snacks. And when you add this table to the memo queue, and you have already done this preliminary editing, post-editing, then you could do an additional post-editing step, and you just collect all these columns in the one file. You make this 2-column RTF file. Afterwards, you should make one big table with 3 columns altogether. First of all, it's very convenient, and actually you should do it after a break, that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. First of all, visually it will be easier because we will look at everything all together. It will be near each other, and in parallel you could work with Russian and Ukrainian translation if it's needed. Because, for example, if you look at the Ukrainian translation and this final version, and you find some barely noticeable mistake, and then backwards, step by step, you could import these columns by means of this RTF format into the MemoQ projects. And again, about some working indicators, about timing. For the translation into Ukrainian language, so actually, I have had already Ukrainian translation, and I translated it into Russian using Google For this file, with the amount of 2,000 words, and in parallel I made some photos for this presentation, I needed 90 minutes. Why from the Ukrainian into Russian? Because there are many text corpuses in Russian language that are being used for the MT. So, and actually, as a result, when we translate using MT from the Ukrainian into Russian, then, as a result, almost all the text, 5-6 parts of the text will be almost ready. But in reverse mode, there is always no such epic reading. One of my colleagues said that my clients want to translate this text into Ukrainian. I have done this translation into Russian. Would you like to participate and translate it into Ukrainian? I agreed. So my colleague sent me the source text in English, Russian texts. So, and I wanted to apply this method, but unfortunately, nothing happened like this. I really needed to dig into the topic, to translate and to keep attention and to discover these barely unnoticeable mistakes. So I was lucky that I really defined these easy-to-miss mistakes prior to deadline. Of course, there could be different cases. Why? How you could use this method if you are the representative of LSPs? The main thing is to use such multilingual, multi-column tables. If your company localizes any document using many languages, you could create such a Google document. First of all, it gives an option for many editors, and in Studio, actually, this function exists in the export of the Word file, but it's not so convenient. You could just create such tables. You could create such a Google document with English, Russian, Polish, or any other languages that you need, and then several editors could work on this Google document, and then each of the editors just uses and uploads the necessary working language pair, and each of the editors just approves or not approves necessary changes and amendments. But the best option is to look at the parallel translations, because sometimes you could look and see that parallel translation in another language pair could be even better than yours, and you could use it also. Sometimes there could be a translation into 10 languages, but it's of course we speak about different series. But if you are interested, if you have some cases, you could use it. And actually, so this is a step-by-step process, and it could be useful for any translator working partially with Ukrainian language. If you have any questions, if anything, just you're welcome.
Thanks, Vatslav, for sharing your experience with us. Maybe somebody has questions. Vatslav, thanks. That's very sophisticated, but I have a question. Don't you think that this looks like some kind that this is something very indirect instead of a direct way to do it? Well, honestly, this is an approach which allows to save at least a third of the time of my working time. And it justifies itself because actually translation from Ukrainian to Russian. In Ukrainian, the biggest stylistic things is like I change "shop" into "dla," and just translate according to Russian syntax. But the most important thing is that the same idea would not be accidentally translated into languages differently. This is how we manage to preserve unity. And in addition, that's a lifeline. Sometimes I correct Ukrainian language, sometimes I do, because you just look at it at somewhat different angle. And something that I wouldn't have seen, I can see it immediately next to Russian, and there is better quality in both languages. Well, actually, with the second point, it's all clear. You just do the second version. That's why I'm asking. Well, actually, this experience is not unique. I can frequently see it where the languages are close. For example, we have a supplier of Czech and Slovak. So he translates to one and takes half price for the second one because they can easily. Well, Serbian, Croatian as well, yes. So from Ukrainian to Russian or vice versa, if you edit machine translation minimally, your productivity rate would be 10 times more. So you just do one translation and then you use engines and then you do the corrections. That's why I'm asking. Why do you need such a complicated way that you have just described? Well, first of all, I work on the whole text at once. Then, secondly, this regular Google Translate in comparison with machine translation engines, for some reason, it has somewhat different results. Sometimes they are even more acceptable. Because I am also interested in all that. And there is a difference, you know. They have to be trained. But even if you do it manually from Ukrainian to Russian, and in parallel you also have the same with the same table, sometimes, yes, it works like that. And in time, it is faster than if you do it direction. And then you just compare. Maybe I have went somewhere to the side in my thoughts or something. Are there more questions to Vatslav? Yes, Valentina Kozlova-Kartareva. I wanted to ask you, have you tried to use MadeCat instead of Google for translation from Russian into Ukrainian? From Russian to Ukrainian? Actually, I try not to do that. I know MadeCat. I know that it is the same engine that actually it's okay, but actually I wasn't looking for some additional things there. I just looked at it's almost the same, so why do I need additional complications here? I mean, why do I pass everything into translated.net? It's just that I wanted to say that we compared quality, and it seemed to us that MadeCat translates into Russian from Ukrainian better. And in the settings, you can actually uncheck the box from passing the results to them, and we can actually dispute whether it works or not. But if you trust them that this checkbox really works, that means that you do not give this translation to them. And it seems to me that, yeah, that's also worth. Yeah, that's worth your attention, and it's rather quick, you know. Actually, the development for this engine was done by Edinburgh University or somebody else, and one European translator simply took the source code of those neural networks that they had, and just at home he constructed it. He's from the Netherlands. He localizes video games, and in his blog there are these posts like why neural anti-rules and why machine translation sucks and why DeepL sucks. There are very detailed examples there, And actually, you can even do it so that it works offline, so that your machine, so that it's just on your on-premises machine, and it's not going to cost too much money. Okay, thank you. Are there more questions? No more questions then? Well, thank you, Vatslav.